Used to be.
It's not. It's just your perception. Okay. This is the time for Dharma discussion. So, what do you want to talk about? And remember, there are no dumb questions. There are no wrong questions. There are no right questions. It's just if it's your question. And we'll try to, well, we have the same questions all the time, so we'll work together. See what we can learn. Oh, Corey.
I just got a little question. In Tisha's Jewel Garland, there's a little part of it that says examine the mind stream daily 3 times, day and night. And when I think about that, I kind of wonder, am I just supposed to pay attention to what the thoughts are, or am I supposed to be judgmental and try and fix them?
What do you think?
I assume there's benefits to both practices, you know, because they talk about antidotes and that kind of stuff in some, you know, so that's like first turning type of work maybe, and then just being present with it and letting it unfold and kind of approaching it more like it's already coming from a place that's already intrinsically whole is more like third turning, like when they think turning of the wheels of the Dharma, like the teachings of the Buddha. So I assume they're both right, but then that leaves me in a state of not knowing what to do and asking a question.
So have you tried both?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I do, but I don't have like I don't really have like a plan of attack. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of like, you feel like it would be nice if you had like I'm doing this in this way rather than just flip-flopping.
Yeah.
Because I assume flip-flopping is kind of how I got to be in a state where, you know.
Of confusion.
Of confusion in the first.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how we're confused, one of the ways, when we're working with the Dharma. Well, in your first question, first wording, judging, you know, isn't gonna, so let's drop judgment, okay? Let's just look at the kind of 2 ways you're outlining. And they are kind of 2 ways, 2 methods. And they both require that first you be aware. So one of the verses of the 8 verses of thought transformation is whenever a destructive emotion rises in my mind, I will firmly avert it in order, I'm kind of paraphrasing, in order not to cause suffering to myself and others. So to firmly avert it, you have to see it. Okay, so any method's going to rely on, be based on awareness. And I don't know about you, but most of the time my awareness is out there. I mean, it feels like there's an out there, an in here and an out there. And my awareness is out there thinking about you and what you're doing and my judgments about what you're doing. And that's the lack of awareness. You know, I'm not even seeing I'm doing that. But the middle turning has a lot of, and maybe the first turning, I don't know so much about it. I mean, I do the Four Noble Truths and all that, but I don't know about their antidote application. But the middle turning antidote application is really big in that method. So you see what's in your mind. Like this week, I had a big bout with pride. And it took me a while to see it. You know, I could just feel twitchy and uncomfortable about the way I was being towards someone. But I couldn't identify what the heck it was. It was just uncomfortable. And I could see there's suffering there. And I could see I'm stuck and I'm not stuck. I'm stuck and I'm not stuck. But it was quite helpful for me to name it. You know, oh, this is pride. Like I think I'm better than her. And I'm judging her as less. And she's probably feeling that. And why this came up was she sent me an email that I felt very angry about. And that's why it pushed me into, okay, I gotta look. So then you think, what's the antidote to pride? It's being humble. But in order to even go through that, I need to be aware. This thing has risen in my mind. I don't want to follow it. I want to see the suffering in it. Well, I'm already feeling that. You know, I'm uncomfortable, I'm angry. I'm working not to just fire off a response, you know, all of that. But I can sit there and there are actual contemplations about pride. One of them is you sit and think about all the things you're not good at. And that was quite helpful. Like, Zopa, you think you're all that, and you're not. Now, we're not talking to, this is so tricky, we're not talking to our relative, conventional, everyday self. We're talking to the self-centered, crazy part of our mind, right? That thinks, I'm better than everyone. Are we suffering right now from anyone thinking that? I'm better than everyone. You can look at the president, but you can find it in you. You know, that's where the work is. I can't make that person do anything. Is this making sense to folks? Mm-hmm. Okay. So there are ways to. It all depends on awareness, no matter what method. Whether you're going to be aware, like the piece I offered during our shamatha this morning. Am I aware what's rising in my mind? And am I willing to let go? That's more the third turning. I don't analyze it. I don't say it's pride. I don't say it's, I need humility. I need to contemplate things I don't know. They're just two different kind of methods. They're both incredible antidotes, right? I mean, it's an amazing antidote to say, I'm aware of this. Am I willing to let go? Yeah, boom, freedom, right there. And you can feel that. You're not caught anymore. I walked into the kitchen here once about a year ago, and Lama Michael, in a rare moment, was in there by himself. I was in a bad mood. And he said, how are you doing? And I said, I feel like crap. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm stuck in samsara. And he looked at me and he started laughing. And he said, no, you're not. And just like that, I started laughing. And in that moment, I wasn't. And I saw for that nanosecond some kind of flip-flop. And it was like, well, that's funny. I was and I wasn't. Just his holding that we're not stuck. And showing me that I got unstuck. I didn't have to go through a thing like, why am I in the bad mood? What started this? But those are good to do too. Now, your question was, how do you choose? between those, right? That was part of your question. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're the only one who will know. There's no formula. There's no formula like do this on Tuesdays and that on Thursdays and this on Friday. We go back to that metaphor of the Dharma is a huge medicine cabinet, So the Buddha, as the doctor, has given us all the medicines. They're all there, all of them. But and Sangha can be nurses, like discussions like this can help, or you can talk to your friend, you can have an interview with a teacher, you can read another book, all of that. It's Sangha Buddha mind helping. But you're the one who has to look in there and say, what's my habit pattern? Or you just keep trying things. It's a huge scientific experiment.
Can you just be like, have that sense of like what would help, like, actually, bring about enlightenment for all beings, and just be like, my guess is that this way would go there.
You just try it. You just try. You don't even have to guess. You just try. Try dropping it. Try the dropping it method and see what happens in your mind. The time that doesn't work for me is when I'm in a really, I'm in a rut, I've fallen in the ditch, and it's not a ditch. Well, I really believe in the ditch. And maybe I don't even know I'm in the ditch. I think I'm up on the road. So trying to, quote, let go of that is really, I don't have that skill yet. So I'll go, okay, I have to, figure out, where am I? Oh, the weeds are 2 feet tall. I must be in the ditch here. That. And then do more contemplation. Those are contemplative practices. But no one can tell you which one to use when. Just try them. They only take a minute to try them both. Yeah? Good question. Right. Any thoughts? Additions?
Just one on the terminology. The term mind stream is interesting. There's in the Tibetan it's rangyu, which is more like, well, the rang is like self, and the yu is like continuity, and that's where the stream that comes from. And so it's a little bit like saying, examine your personality, except it's not a noun. It's like the process.
Yeah.
Because your personality is not like a fixed item. Like, oh, I am a so-and-so and I do this. Actually examine how this is unfolding in the moment. So from this perspective, it is the instruction does actually call more to the kind of foundation processes of actually discerning what's going on and determining what generally we should encourage and what we should let go of. In the core of it, you can actually just look directly into the experience as it's arising and find that it actually is not it's not compelling in this solid way, that you're not actually stuck with it. You can look at that. But generally, most of the time, just finding that we're not stuck, it's a little bit just like taking your foot off the gas while you're going downhill. You're not accelerating at the moment, but there's still a huge amount of momentum. So there is some idea that you actually have to steer, and you actually have to apply the brakes sometimes. So there are things to do, and so just the simple liberation as something's arising, it's probably we can use that, but it's usually like a momentary opening. And then we actually also have to use the discernment about what we're doing, what to let go of, and what to actually encourage. So, the term mind stream or rangyu, the continuity of the expression of our karma. And that's kind of what we're looking at, like just what's unfolding, what's unfolding. And to be kind of plug into that so that we're kind of more always aware of how that's unfolding as we go through life. You see that.
So, Thich Nhat Hanh has this kind of quick way into some of that I use, which is there's a mind stream, there's a body stream. The body is also streaming. It's just streaming a little slower, so we don't think of it. But the thoughts, you see, they tumble at times forward like a waterfall, then they slow down. The emotions, the same thing. Sensations constantly shifting. You eat a meal and just notice the sensations prior, during, and after. Huge changes in sensations in your body. There's nothing that is not streaming. And yet we perceive it as not streaming, right? And that's the source of a ton of suffering. We're not in line with reality. So that's the sitting that we do each day, is to strengthen that muscle, shall we call it, that is able to be aware, oh, this is streaming. I focus on my body, mindful, shift. Sensation. Focus on my mind, shift. My emotions, my story. None of us at this moment could probably, just couldn't describe our most recent meditation session and every thought we had. Gone. Streamed right on by. We might pick up something and say, oh, I was stuck on that one thing, but were you stuck there the whole 40 minutes? No. And I sometimes see it, especially when I was in 1 year retreat. You know how you're watching television and there's like some compelling news going on, but across the bottom this little ticker tape's going by with like 30 different stories, and you get caught every once in a while on one, and then I couldn't read that one, the next one. And our minds are so much like that, the main story, but there's this little thing going on, and almost never is it turned off. Or maybe never. Yeah, Dora.
I don't remember this very perfectly at all, but I remember being struck by, I was reading more of a Theravada source on the Eightfold Path. And to be honest, I can't remember if this was Right Thought or one of the others, but it was described in essence as basically just simplified it down to these 4 things, which was, notice if you have a negative thought or emotion, whatever, arising. If you do, let go of it. Notice if you have a positive thought arising, and if you do, increase it, enhance it. I don't know what the word was exactly, but that moment, it struck me that is kind of definitely one of the things we're talking about here, is this moment to moment, awareness, and then try to an ongoing effort to let the negative fall away, not sustain the negative, and to build on the positive. And so I think that's something, just to have a sense of that moment to moment thing. That could be a way to practice. But it also, I noticed for myself, there's the thing, like pretty much what Zopa was saying, I think, about the ditch, which might be the same thing, is if I get into an obsession on something that is really this moment, it's, wow, I'm really, that's something I'd like to let go of. You know, not going away, not letting go. And the next moment, oh, I really like to let go of that. Can't do, so that, to me, it's, the awareness is showing me something and that I'm not capable of undoing there. But so then it points to me, that would be a good thing to sit down and contemplate that, or use a meditation method of looking directly at it, or looking at the experience of it or something, but it's not just going to disappear in my moment-to-moment practice. On the other hand, other things, if I've done some practice with some kind of mind state, it's not so difficult, and I just see it, then the fact that I've done some contemplations before or something, that where I saw that some kind of anger could be let go of. Now, if I see that, it can just instantly go away. And so that, to me, that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, thank you. One of the clues for me, I'm realizing, back to your question, like which one to apply, like I'm thinking about this recent struggle with pride. The clue was I'm obsessing. I can't let go of this story. I wasn't holding it 24/7, but, I would kind of wake up and, it would be the story that comes. Oh, she said that, I did that, she wrote that, and that's a clue that just, you're not going to be able to pop the bubble. Like Doris said, you want to let go of it, but it isn't let go of you. And that's even a funny way to say it, because there's no it in you. Of course, your own mind is the whole schmear. But if you're returning over and over, then you want to do more of the taking refuge, contemplating. You're aware of it, but you try and pop the bubble like, I let go. Am I willing to let go? Yeah, I'm willing to let go. Oh, here it is back 2 seconds later.
I'm still not sure whether he just meant to examine it and not let go of it or dissolve it, or just examine it and move on.
You examine it with. We need, all of us, to hold it within that compassion base. Otherwise, we're just judging it. Like, God, I'm so screwed up. That would not be a helpful contemplation. And there are a lot of books that lead us out of these places. Like, I'm thinking of Pema Chodron's The Places That Scare You and Start Where You Are. Those two are very like how to hold these things in compassion and still think about them. So that the thinking about them doesn't make the distress more solid, doesn't add to the suffering, but untangles it. Yeah, Eric.
The practice it kind of reminded me of is the one that is sometimes taught as a bedtime practice, where you sort of look back over your day, and of course you could become pretty obsessive about it, So the instruction was, find something that you did that you felt was beneficial, and and feel good about that, and think, okay, I'm going to try to do that more often. And then find something that you think, wow, that didn't go well, or I think I created more negativity than positivity. And feel regret for that, and aspire to not do it again. And I think that's sort of, that's kind of a model for the judgment practice you were talking about. Like, you know, if I wanted to look at the behavior, my actions. But so that's one way you could do it. I personally find that one a challenging practice to do at bedtime. It's hard not to expand it beyond one thing each. And I'm not crazy about regret being the last thing on my mind. I can try to aspire to not do it again, but the regret tends to have more oomph. So to me, I'm attracted to the 3 times a day thing. Like that, they don't usually give you very specific, like usually they say, oh, do this all the time, you know.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about the mind training is it's, you know, blend your mind with the Dharma, and then make the Dharma your life. It's sort of they're like, well, you know, 3 times a day, come home, come back home. Because that's what happens if you examine the mind stream, right? You see all of that stuff, and you see that if you look carefully, that it's not you. And so then you're home. And if you can cultivate the habit of coming back home 3 times a day, that seems like a really powerful practice.
This is tied to the previous question, and it's about when you have experienced something traumatic or perhaps inherited an experience of trauma from one of your parents or something, you know, that trauma can get carried on physically in the body. Everything I read says your brain has been altered, and that just contemplations of this sort don't necessarily lead to being able to drop something. And I'm wondering what in the Dharma speaks to letting go of something that is at a more physical, you know, literally a physical brain shift kind of level.
I don't know, but what comes to mind first is the brain is not the mind. So the brain is a physical organ, and chemicals shift around in it, the neutrons and electrons and whatever those synapses and all that do get shifted by traumatic circumstances. Although they are finding they do get shifted away from that too with certain practices. But the brain is not the mind. When we die and when we're alive, my teacher said very clearly the body and mind are kind of entangled, but they are separate continuums. So right now, your mind is connected to this form, which is always streaming, changing. But when you die, it will not be connected to this form, and in a certain way right now, the connection is tenuous, not as tight as we think. How do we know that? Because we can see people being very at ease and delighted who have horrible diseases. People who have had horrible trauma, far worse than our traumas, who carry on with a joy and a compassion in the world. So the mind is not stuck by that. It's affected, but not stuck. So I think one thing that's very helpful for me is just remembering that. You know, I am not, there's no stuckness except my belief in the stuckness. So that's just something to contemplate. I'd like to hear from others about that deep trauma and the brain.
Reading a book about it right now. I
Good.
don't know how that's going to turn out. It started out pretty good. It's called The Body Keeps the Score.
I'm reading that right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's good.
I think the fundamental thing is what you practice grows stronger. And there's nice little demonstrations from neuroscience about some of the positive changes that can happen in your brain and even your neuroanatomy as a result of consistent practice of meditation and probably a lot of good things. And so here's what I shared this last week, but he was talking specifically about this. This is from Ken MacLeod, and it's in the context of the four immeasurables practice. And he says, because of course, the trauma happened in the past, and what you're left with is kind of a deeply habituated way of experiencing memory and things like that. And so he says, stepping out of deeply habituated ways of experiencing things involves a separation. And separation, even from bad relationships, is painful. And the author kind of observes this in the book. He's like, wow, they had this terrible experience, but they seem to be really attached to it in a weird way. And Ken says, he's trying to cheer people up. He says, there are many good things that happen in the practice. Many good things. One discovers the possibility of being free of judgment, prejudice. One discovers the possibility within oneself of radiant warmth, being able to be completely present with another's suffering and pain, and of being able to celebrate the success and joy of others. He's talking about the four immeasurables practice. He says, but all those come from being free of the reactive emotions which currently operate within us. And the way we become free of conditioning, he says, all conditioning is an attempt to avoid pain. The way we become free of conditioning is to experience the pain that the conditioning is trying to avoid, and know that that pain is not what we are. Knowing this intellectually is useless. We have to know it experientially. So in the context of trauma and what you're talking about, to me, it's not a coincidence that this dialogue occurred during a discussion about four immeasurables practice. Because the four immeasurables are a lot of things, but one way they are qualities of our consciousness that we can bring to all of our experience. And I think and I'm out on a limb here, but with my own deeply habituated ways of experiencing things, they tend to go along with a habit of bringing a certain quality of attention to them, or maybe lack of attention might be more accurate. And it's like being caught sort of in a loop. And you sort of, once you get into the loop, you think that that's the way things are, and you're not aware that no, this is just an experience or just a thought or just a feeling, and it's not actually what you are. So, to me, I'm hoping this is where he gets in the book. I'm not sure because I'm only a quarter way through it. But I'm hoping that the answer is that if you want to bring these experiences in your practice and try to work with them, that you mix them with the qualities of attention that you cultivate from Four Immeasurables practice. So kindness, compassion, equanimity, and even joy. That seems a stretch, but the other three actually seem like a pretty good fit. And I think that's where you create a container for those experiences in which they can be experienced. And you can see that they are not you.
Yeah, thank you. And as Eric was talking, I was thinking about working with some of my own traumas. Loss of stepson who was murdered is one. And working with that, the shock of it and the sorrow. And one way in to all the Four Immeasurables was the Tonglen. And it starts with yourself. We forget that, but Tonglen starts with yourself. So you put that self out there that has been traumatized or feels the trauma. You take that away and, aim it at the self grasping at your heart that thinks you're separate, and or your parents or everybody affected. And I was working with a therapist once on something much earlier trauma, and she said, take your 4-year-old self and do the Tonglen with that 4-year-old. That was so powerful. I was in tears over and over. But that was what I needed to experience and go through, was that soft-heartedness toward that wounded child who I was over-identified with, who I hadn't, gone, oh, that's the past. I don't have to carry that forever and react forever. And occasionally she still shows up. And now I hold her with, like, okay, what do you mean? But before I was like, and therefore being constantly doing what this person says, somehow holding on to a trauma, not seeing the suffering and then holding on, not seeing a way not to hold on. So I think Tonglen and the Four Immeasurables are ways to stop holding on. Yeah. Yeah. Miriam.
Should I use the microphone?
Sure.
So I've had a lot of fear the past week and a half, 2 weeks. And that was related to my early childhood trauma. And as a result, my meditation has been either non-existent or I think I got about 9 breaths maybe throughout the entire meditation that were remotely.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, that is good.
9 is good.
I just want to put in a plug. I know that we don't deal with psychology as much here, but we do, whether we like it or not, because, but there are newer techniques in mental health therapy and psychology that do help with these things. And Buddhism gets really close, but I just don't think that sometimes I think we need to see a therapist, and sometimes, and, people who do
We all need to
EMDR,
see a therapist,
you know,
for sure.
EMDR and all this other stuff that have been demonstrated to be much effective, because that's really helpful, and then you can learn to do some of those things when you're sitting on the mat. And so you can actually practice meditation, and I do like the thing about the childhood and all that, and trying to be a little bit more compassionate to myself and things like that. Anyway, I just wanted to put in a plug for that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to practice Buddhism unless you get that stuff.
Yeah, we can use what works. Buddhist psychology works quite well for huge healing. And then for some people, it bumps into some kind of wall, maybe from what's called spiritual bypassing of deep emotions. That can happen. And therapy can bump into a wall, which is digging in the trauma. Good therapists don't do that, but you don't always find the kind that help you end it, because maybe they don't know. So there can be cautions towards either, and great benefit. I've done both, and I found great benefit from both. I'd recommend a book if people want to read something else called The Wisdom of Imperfection. It's a marvelous book. Also, Ken MacLeod's Wake Up to Your Life really maps out the psychological grounds and applies Buddhist philosophy. So Ken MacLeod's Wake Up to Your Life is a wonderful book. But this one by Rob Preece, P-R-E-C-E, called The Wisdom of Imperfection. He went through the early, wave of Westerners going over to Asia and sitting with monks and sitting in caves and huge amounts of training, and then pretty much went crazy, like completely imbalanced, because his Western psychological self wasn't going along with this. And what he pointed out was when he would go to the Tibetan masters, they didn't really understand what he was talking about, because their culture doesn't come into that individual psychological way that we are. So he left, went through his breakdown, became a therapist, and wrote this amazing book called The Wisdom of Imperfection. And it's quite helpful about Western psychological ways of being, bumping into Buddhism, and honoring both, where he doesn't criticize or no one's right or wrong. It's just, a lot like what Miriam was saying. We as Westerners may need to pay more attention to psychology, because we see ourselves as very psychological beings and individual beings. And not everyone in the world does that. So, okay, I think we have time for just one more. Yeah.
I was just going to say, as somebody who works, one of the good things about finding a therapist is if you need a larger container, we are huge containers.
Uh-huh.
And so in that way, being able to, I think that's where some of that healing can come, is that it becomes, you need that safety.
Yeah.
To be able to have that experience, and sometimes finding a safe person to do that with.
Yeah.
If you can't contain it all yourself.
Yeah, just like sometimes when you talk to a good skilled friend, you're surprised what you hear yourself say, and you're healed by that. And then a therapist being even more neutral can really be helpful. Okay, we're at the end for today. That's the beginning too. Let's dedicate.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you all, and I believe there is a neon training happening in a half hour in that room. So if you have not learned our new software, it's about a 30-minute training, and you'll get your own password, and that will allow you to register for classes, make donations, stay in touch. So please stay if you can. Okay, thank you so much. Wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Very helpful.